Okay, imagine a world where the rules of physics we see every day just don't apply. A place where tiny particles can be in two places at once and even influence, like evolution itself.
Hmm.
It's the world of quantum biology.
It really is mind-bending, and it raises this big question. Do quantum effects play a crucial role in the very building blocks of life? Like, are we all secretly quantum?
Well, to get to the bottom of that, let's start with one of the biggest puzzles in biology,
Hmm.
adaptive mutations. You have
Yeah.
bacteria in an environment, and their only food source is lactose. The problem is they have this faulty gene, so they can't even digest it. You'd think, oh, they'd starve, right?
Right.
But they don't?
Nope. They actually
Yeah.
mutate that faulty gene and they start eating the lactose.
Huh.
What's crazy is these mutations only seem to happen when they're actually beneficial. It almost seems like they know what mutation they need. It just kind of pops up, which goes against traditional evolutionary theory.
Hold on, are you saying that evolution might not be entirely random?
It's not quite that simple. Some scientists think that maybe quantum mechanics could be happening here, like the phenomenon of proton tunneling in DNA. Imagine a proton, a subatomic particle, acting like it can just go through walls, like it can leap from one side to the other, even if it doesn't have enough energy to actually climb over.
So how does that work with mutations?
Imagine the protons in the DNA of these bacteria, they exist in a state of superposition. So they are in both the mutated and the non-mutated positions at the same time,
Yeah.
until something forces them to pick one. The lactose, it might act as a measurement, almost like in quantum mechanics, causing the proton to like snap into that mutated position. And because those are the only bacteria that can survive, that's what we see.
Whoa, that's kind of out there. Is there a way to even test this idea?
Scientists are using something called kinetic isotope effects. It's pretty clever. The idea is to replace the proton with, well, a deuterium nucleus. It's basically just a heavier proton. Now, if tunneling is really happening, then the heavier deuterium would tunnel much slower, like way slower than the regular proton.
Okay, so by comparing the mutation rates in regular water and in heavy water, where the hydrogen is replaced with deuterium, we can actually see those fingerprints of the tunneling.
Exactly. But isolating the effects of proton tunneling from all the other factors that can cause mutations, that's really hard. Think of it like trying to hear someone whisper in a hurricane.
It makes you think, what would it even mean if we could prove that proton tunneling is affecting mutations?
It would completely change our understanding of evolution. It could suggest that mutations, maybe they aren't these purely random events. Maybe they're influenced by these quantum phenomena. But to really get a handle on this, we need to look at the structure of DNA. Imagine a simple model, like a ball held between two springs.
Yeah, I can see that. So the ball, that's the proton, and the springs, they create this, what's called a double potential energy well.
Exactly. One, well, that's the proton's normal position. The other is the tautomeric position. That's the mutated form. Classically, the proton would need a bunch of energy to hop over that barrier between those two wells.
But with quantum mechanics, it can just tunnel right through.
Right through. And to model this in a structure like DNA, scientists use something called density functional theory, DFT. DFT maps out all the forces on that proton from all the other atoms in the DNA molecule.
It's like creating a map of the proton's energy landscape, showing all the paths it can take.
And what's really interesting is that calculations suggest that the environment inside the cell, it could actually help, not hinder, this tunneling process. It's like the cell is encouraging this quantum behavior.
So the cell is not just watching, it's like it's a participant in this quantum dance, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but let's look at something else, the human brain and consciousness. We can follow the path of events from sensory input to motor output, in the brain, but where does consciousness even fit in?
Yeah, it's the mind-body problem, right? This idea that how can something not physical, like an idea, actually move physical matter? And how do we take all that jumbled sensory information and make a single unified experience?
For example, think about smelling something. You don't experience a bunch of signals, you experience a single smell, a single aroma. But there's no central place in the brain where all that information goes. So how does it combine? That's the binding problem.
Exactly. And even more, how do thoughts, which are information, lead to actions in the real world? It's really a puzzle.
And this is where it gets really interesting when you compare it to computers. Computers can process information really well, but are they conscious? Could our brains be some kind of biological quantum computer?
That's a really exciting idea. To understand this, we have to go into qubits. Imagine like the quantum version of bits. Those are the pieces of information in computers. A bit can only be 0 or 1. But a qubit, it can be both 0 and 1 at the same time. This is superposition.
So a qubit can hold more information because it doesn't have to pick one or the other.
Exactly. And when you have multiple qubits that are entangled, you create the system where the state of one instantly changes the others, no matter how far apart they are. Imagine a network of spheres connected by elastic strings. If you move one, the whole network changes instantly. This is entanglement, and it's super important in quantum computers.
This idea that everything is connected, it makes you think about how different parts of the brain work together. Could entanglement be the key to this binding problem, how we unify experience?
It could be, but making quantum computers is really hard. They are so sensitive to their environment. Any interaction with the outside can cause what's called decoherence. It basically destroys the quantum state and makes the system classical.
So the big question is, can a system as messy as the human brain, keep that quantum coherence long enough to use it to think?
That is the question. Some scientists think that structures in brain cells called microtubules could act like those qubits in a biological quantum computer. Microtubules are part of the internal structure of the cell, and they might be protected enough for quantum processes to happen.
That's interesting. But aren't microtubules pretty large and complex? How could they keep this quantum coherence in the warm, wet environment of the brain?
That's a major problem for this theory. People who support it point to Gödel's incompleteness theorems. They suggest that the human mind can do things that are beyond the ability of normal computers. This suggests maybe there are quantum processes in the brain?
So microtubules are fascinating. But we still don't know if they have anything to do with consciousness. Are there other places where quantum mechanics could be working in the brain?
Absolutely. Like some scientists think quantum effects could impact ion channels, the proteins that control the flow of ions across nerve cell membranes. These channels are basically how the brain works.
So these tiny channels could be using quantum tunneling to control those brain signals.
That's the idea. Quantum tunneling could be how they achieve that speed and selectivity of the nerve signals. It adds another layer of complexity. And it brings up the idea of the brain's electromagnetic field.
Wait, the brain has an electromagnetic field.
It does. It's made by all those nerve impulses firing. It's very complex, It has a lot of information, and it's changing all the time based on our thoughts and experiences. Some scientists think that consciousness might not be just from the particles in the brain, but from this field.
So instead of looking at the neurons, we should be looking at the field that they all create.
Yes. If consciousness is coming from this field, it could be how we solve the binding problem. The field itself is a single thing, and it could act as the canvas for our experience.
So instead of focusing on the instruments of the orchestra, we should listen to the whole symphony, the whole fields of the brain.
That's a great way to put it. And maybe the conductor of that symphony is actually quantum mechanics, organizing this complex dance of particles and fields to create consciousness.
It's wild to think that the same forces that control the subatomic world could be involved in our thoughts and feelings.
It really is, and this is just the beginning. Where quantum mechanics and biology meet, it's this frontier with so much potential. It could change how we understand life itself.
It's amazing to think that quantum mechanics might be the conductor of the brain symphony. But let's go even bigger, the origin of life. How did we get from this soup of chemicals to the amazing self-replicating systems we see today?
It's the ultimate question, isn't it? When you think about how unlikely it is for life to just happen randomly. It's incredible. Even a simple bacteria, it's so complex. Thousands of genes, all those proteins, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's almost like winning the lottery every day for billions of years. It seems impossible that all those parts could just come together.
And that's where this idea of a quantum leap in the origin of life comes in. Maybe it wasn't just random chance. Maybe quantum mechanics was involved in putting together those first self-replicating molecules.
Okay, so let's picture the early Earth. Billions of years ago. We have those warm alkaline hydrothermal vents. They're spewing out chemicals. It's like this primordial soup, this lab for life.
Exactly. And imagine these tiny pores in the rocks, like little ecosystems where these basic organic compounds are forming and interacting. And in one of these pores, we have this protoenzyme. It can catalyze some reactions, but it can't replicate itself yet.
Okay, so we have this protoenzyme, but how does quantum mechanics get involved?
Remember we talked about proton tunneling in DNA? Well, imagine those protons tunneling within this protoenzyme. They're exploring different shapes. Each one has a different ability.
So instead of just moving around randomly, it's using quantum tunneling to quickly try out tons of possibilities.
Yeah, and this protoenzyme with its tunneling protons, it could be like a really simple quantum computer.
A quantum computer made of just one molecule. How is that possible?
In a way, yeah. Those protons, they are acting like those qubits. They exist in many states at the same time. This quantum computer, it's trying to solve the biggest problem, how to make a copy of itself.
So the protoenzyme is searching through all these possibilities. And because it's a quantum system, he can check them all out at the same time.
Exactly. And eventually, decoherence happens. The system collapses. And if it ends up in the state that lets it self-replicate, boom, we have the start of life.
It's a big idea, but it makes sense. It's a way to get around the super low odds of life just appearing by chance. Instead of wandering around randomly, this protoenzyme is using quantum mechanics to look for the answer.
It shows you how important quantum mechanics could be, not just in how life works, but how it even started.
That's pretty mind-blowing to think that those rules that govern the subatomic world could have been involved in creating life.
It really is. And if life did find a way to use quantum mechanics billions of years ago, what can we learn from that to create new technologies today?
You mean like bio-inspired quantum technologies, using what we see in quantum biology to make like better solar cells or new catalysts?
Yeah. Imagine solar panels that use the same quantum principles as plants. They could be incredibly efficient. Or new catalysts based on the tunneling and enzymes. They could speed up reactions and change how we do things.
We could even make completely new cells that use those principles.
Right. These artificial cells could be like tiny factories, making everything from fuel to medicine powered by the sun.
It's a cool vision of the future. Biology and quantum mechanics coming together to create amazing new things. But let's talk more about this idea of living technology. What does it mean, and what are the good things that can come from it?
Living technology, it's a lot of things. From the old stuff like agriculture and fermentation to the new stuff like synthetic biology. It's using living systems to make things we need.
So it's not just copying nature, it's using actual living organisms like tools.
Yeah, exactly. And the good things are huge. Think about crops that don't need fertilizer, or microbes that clean up pollution or make fuel really efficiently.
Or even buildings that repair themselves and adapt to the environment, like a living organism.
Yeah, those are just some ideas. And there are two ways to do this, top down and bottom up.
So top-down is changing organisms we already have, like engineering crops or bacteria.
That's it. And we've done some amazing things already, like golden rice. It's made to have vitamin A. It helps with malnutrition in some countries.
But bottom up, that's something else. It's building new life forms from scratch, like building a car from parts.
Right. And that's where it gets really interesting and maybe a little scary. Bottom up synthetic biology, it's about designing cells to do exactly what we want. We don't have to deal with the limitations of existing organisms.
So instead of just tweaking what nature made, we're making something totally new, just for our needs.
And while it's still early, the possibilities are huge. Imagine cells that eat plastic or make materials for medicine.
It's an amazing idea. But even making a simple cell is super hard. What are some of the biggest challenges?
One is the membrane. You have to make a stable membrane that keeps the stuff inside and controls what goes in and out. Then there's the genetic system. It has to store and copy information. And the metabolic system, it needs to use energy and build molecules.
It's like building a whole city in a tiny little sphere.
Exactly. And then there's energy. How do you power a cell? Photosynthesis is one way, but copying that is super complicated.
But what about those quantum heat engines we talked about? Could we use those to make artificial photosynthesis that's really efficient?
That's a great idea. Imagine cells that use sunlight as well as plants. Or even better, we could use that energy to power other things inside the cell, like making molecules or doing specific jobs.
It's like those cells become little factories, making all kinds of things using the sun. But just making a cell that does one thing is really hard. How do you even design something that doesn't exist?
It takes a lot of people, chemists, biologists, engineers, even computer scientists. They use different approaches. Some copy nature, others design totally new molecules and structures.
It's a mix of inspiration from nature and new ideas. What are some of the tools they use?
Computer modeling is huge. By simulating molecules on computers, scientists can test out designs before they even go to the lab.
It's like making a virtual version first.
Exactly. And those simulations are getting better. They use quantum mechanics now, so they're more accurate.
So we're mixing computer design with quantum biology to create these new technologies.
And the potential is huge. Artificial cells could change everything, from medicine to manufacturing. They could solve some of the world's biggest problems in a sustainable way.
It's a future where biology and technology become one, where it's hard to tell the difference between living and artificial.
And it's a future that's exciting and scary, full of benefits, but also things we need to be careful about.
It's incredible to think about how quantum biology is shaping this future. It's helping us understand how quantum mechanics is involved in life, but also helping us create new forms of life and technology that could change our world. It's really amazing to think about this living technology, right? And how it could change what we even think of as life. But as we go into this new territory, what are some of the ethical things we have to consider?
That's such an important question. We have this power, so we have a big responsibility, right?
Yeah.
This ability to, make and change life forms, it brings up so many ethical questions. Like, we have to think about the consequences, and make sure that we use these technologies to help people and the planet.
So what are we worried about? Where's the line between making cool new stuff and doing it responsibly?
One thing is, what if things happen that we didn't expect? Like releasing genetically modified stuff into the environment, it could mess up ecosystems or create new resistant things. And making artificial cells, well, what if they get out of the lab and start replicating uncontrollably?
It seems like we have to be super careful. We need rules and safety things that keep up with how fast technology is changing.
Absolutely. We need really solid ethical guidelines for how we develop and use these technologies, and everyone needs to be involved. Scientists, ethicists, the government, and regular people. It has to be an open conversation.
So it's not just about the science. It's about how it affects society and what risks there are. We need to make sure these things are used in a good way to make things better for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And we have to ask the hard questions about who owns and controls these technologies? Who will benefit? Who might be left out? Will they make existing inequalities worse or create new ones?
These are big questions. We need to be really thoughtful and talk about them. It seems like we need a new kind of understanding of science, right?
Yeah.
One that not only deals with this quantum world and the living world, but also the ethical stuff that comes up when they come together.
I agree. We need a society where people understand the science and can talk about how we develop and use these technologies.
That's where education is so important.
Yeah.
We need to explain the science to people and show them the good things and the bad things that could happen.
We need to give people the power to make smart choices and help shape the future. We want to make sure these powerful technologies are used for good.
It's like we are at the beginning of this whole new scientific revolution, a quantum biological revolution. It has the power to completely change our world.
And to do it right, we have to talk to each other and work together. Scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and the public. We have to make sure this helps everyone. It's time for a new way of doing science, where knowledge and responsibility go together.
That's a great point. As we learn more about this quantum edge of biology, it's clear that it's not just about discoveries. It's about making a future where we use these incredible advancements wisely and ethically.
I couldn't agree more. We have this amazing chance to use quantum biology to solve some of the biggest problems facing our planet. If we work together, we can make sure this journey leads to a better future for everyone.
This has been an amazing look into quantum biology. From the smallest particles to the beginning of life, it's clear that this field is full of wonder and mystery, and so much potential. It reminds us that we still have so much to learn about the universe and ourselves. And as we keep pushing the limits of science, who knows what other incredible discoveries are waiting for us?